If you are ever in Nottinghamshire, I can recommend the Newark Air Museum. It's on a former RAF site which it shares with the Newark Showground. Most of the types on show are post 1945, but there is a small collection of World War I and World War II memorabilia. I was at the showground for Partizan. It's one of 3 war game shows which are held there every year. Hammerhead, Partizan and other Partizan. And if you're attending any of these war game shows and you want to do something different, literally half a mile or a very long walk down the road is the Newark Air Museum. I recommend it.
So here I am inside the Newark Air Museum, just next to the Newark Showground. We've got the unmistakable shape of the wonderful Buccaneer. Got the refueling probe at the top. Ultra low level strike aircraft, soldiered on into the early 90s, doing jobs it wasn't designed for, but there you go. And they've got a nice example of it here at Newark. Another view of the Buccaneer here, and a little bit of a bomb load underneath on the dolly. Right, I'm inside one of the hangars. Over here we have the cockpit of a Sepicat Jaguar. If you look elsewhere on my Warspite thread, you'll see that there's a complete one in a village not far from me at Tattersall. That's featured in a separate video. Here we have a most unusual replica of the Lee Richards circular biplane. Think of it as 2 flying rings held together by interplane struts. It is, I hasten to add, a replica, not an original. Here we go, this is the Lee Richards annular biplane. Think of it as 2 flying rings bolted together. Lee Richards annular biplane replica. Directly opposite the annular biplane is of course the unmistakable shape of an Avro Vulcan twin-engined ex-RAF communications search. They even used them for coastal command work during early part of World War II. And stretching down, we got some other unmistakable signs which we'll get to in a second. Just behind me, superb Draken. Swedish made Draken. There, and over here, a retarded bomb. If you're going in low, you don't want to get blown up by your own bomb, especially if it's instantaneously fused. So those tail fins open up, slow its descent, and allow the bombing aircraft time to get away. Something to warm the cockles of any desperate pilot's heart, a selection of ejector seats. How to get out of a damaged aircraft in very quick order. One of de Havilland's later jet designs. This of course is the Venom, built essentially as a night fighter. The poor radar operator lived in a hole at the back, and the pilot got the cockpit view. So that's the Venom. Also from de Havilland, and also a twin boom design, is the slightly earlier Vampire. This is a T-11. Vampire is one of the sort of early first post-war jet fighters the RAF used. The Meteor being sort of wartime design, and in this case, to allow the pilot to get out, explosive charges were used to to remove the tail and allow the pilot to escape without getting killed. That's of course before ejector seats were invented. So it's de Havilland Vampire. Here we have the Hunting Percival Provost, basic trainer, familiar to most RAF trainees and in fact pilots all over the world. And parked next to it, Royal Navy Westland helicopter. Of course, it's Sikorsky design, but it's manufactured by Wessex. Most of the exhibits here are post 1945, post-war, but being Nottingham and Nottinghamshire near to Lincolnshire, you couldn't possibly avoid mentioning RAF Bomber Command. And here we have components from a number of aircraft, mostly Lancaster, plus some large models of Lancaster, Sterling, and I think I see a Hampden over there as well. It's not signed, but I think the fuselage is from a Lancaster WSJ. The wingtip up there was recovered from a reservoir after it snapped off a crashing aircraft. We have a variety of turrets, which could be fitted to British bombers, Lancaster model, Sterling model. Now the Sterling is one of those aircraft that doesn't get much of a mention. It's one of the three big heavy bombers, Sterling, Halifax and Lancaster, but it was the one that sort of pretty much started it, but it's had shortcomings, including a inability to carry large bombs, so eventually got relegated to other tasks such as glider towing, etc. And over here, what I described as a Hampden is of course another Sterling.
Try again, Warspite.
Over here we have the unmistakable shape of a Halifax, the one which I thought was a Hampden when I looked from the other end. I can only see two engines. So it's handy page Halifax there, short Sterling there, Avro Lancaster over there, surrounded by various parts from those aircraft. There's a little bit from World War I, which is a particular interest of mine. And this tail fabric here belongs to a shot down Pfalz fighter. It spent many years on the walls of a local garage here in Newark. It's now on display in the Newark Air Museum. And the story on the board next to it suggests it was actually brought down not by machine gun fire, but by a barrage balloon that had been filled with explosives. And when the Pfalz, which was favoured for balloon busting, went charging in, it was blown out of the sky. We have a display of World War I aircraft propellers, mainly four bladers. And over here, of course, the SE-5A, Scout Experimental 5A, a Royal Aircraft Factory product. One of the most successful fighters of, one of the most successful Royal Flying Corps RAF fighters of World War I. Right over there, I've got the unmistakable shape of an Avro Shackleton, and here the handy page Hastings. This one's got a big radome underneath it and was used for weather observations, and also used during the Cod War, keeping track of the fishing fleets. Right, not just RAF types here, we've got a MiG-23 here in front of us, and over there a MiG-27. Nothing on the tickets to indicate where they got them from. I assume they've come from Warsaw Pact countries and then been passed on to the museum later. Can't see the Russians handing them over. So that's MiG-23, and this one in front is MiG-27. Now inside the second hangar, there's an impressive display of gear here, including close in the unmistakable shape of a Harrier. My battery's going to pack up in a minute.
And indeed it did. So I'm now continuing with still shots only, taken from my still camera. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, please feel free to give us a thumbs up. And if you're really enjoying it, please feel free to subscribe. Outside one of the hangars, we have a recreated World War II Anderson shelter. For those of a certain age or not British residents, this is the shelter that was supplied to most households in certainly the urban areas of Britain. It came in a form of corrugated iron. You dug it into a hole in the back garden, covered it with earth, and it gave you modest protection from bomb splinters, or more importantly, anti-aircraft splinters. several tons of steel could rain down over a city while it's being bombed, but that would come from the anti-aircraft fire. So protection against anti-aircraft splinters, protection against localised blast, the Anderson shelter, supplied in kit form, dig it into your own back garden, 1939. One of several non-RAF types to be found at Newark is this French-built Super Mystère 4. On site they have at least two Canberras. The Canberra is one of the post-war success stories. Twin-jet engined bomber reconnaissance. In fact, the reconnaissance role continued for a long time. They're also used for specialised work such as testing radars, which I think this one's been adapted for. And the RAF frankly only retired them a few years ago. They kept 2 or 3 at Farnborough for sort of specialised testing work, etc. And the Americans also bought the design, extended the wings somewhat, and operated them in the Vietnam War and elsewhere as the B-57. So this is the Canberra bomber. This is more or less where my camera battery packed up before. So we are at the side of the Harrier. A variety of underwing stores visible there. Of course, this was the aircraft that went on to such great success in the Falklands conflict in 1982 and later took part in Bosnia and Afghanistan operations. The vertical takeoff, Harrier. Another non-British aircraft, this is the Swedish-made Saab Viggen. I was once at an air show at North Weald, the old North Weald fighter meet. One of these boys went over our heads and then decided to turn his afterburners on. My ears were ringing for days afterwards, but still a formidable aircraft from the Swedish company of Saab. Tucked away under the wings of this Hawker Hunter, one of my favourite aircraft, are a variety of rocket pods. Don't necessarily think they're all RAF, I think there's different types there. And this is the successor to the underwing rockets carried by Typhoons and Tempests in World War II. So these are modern underwing rocket pods for firing multiple rockets, normally in the ground attack role, but I believe there's been at least 2 occasions they've been fired anti-aircraft with some success. Rocket pods. And facing the rocket pods, a selection of machine guns and cannon, again stretching from the post-war period up to modern times. Every military airfield needs to be able to protect itself either against infiltration or outright attack, and the role of the RAF regiment is to fill that need. They guard the airfields, guard the aircraft, guard the installations, have to be prepared to go all over the world, and have effectively they are a military regiment but tasked with RAF protection. Here we see them in standard kit, and that gentleman is actually holding an M50 caliber Browning M2 known as the Mardeuse. Handy for anti-aircraft work, also very handy for ground work. That's the RAF regiment. Often voted the ugliest aircraft in the world, you can see why, is the Fairy Gannet. Nevertheless, a very capable aircraft. Its primary role was initially anti-submarine, but it became advanced air early warning. It's got a huge radome underneath, and it was the unfortunate premature retirement of the Fairy Gannet, which left the Royal Navy in such difficulties in the Falklands conflict, because they had no carrier that could carry the Gannet, and there were none available. We eventually had to substitute with large advanced air warning radars held under helicopters. So the Fairy Gannet, ugly but capable. One of the fastest aircraft of its era was the English Electric Lightning, and we have an example here. I once had the privilege of walking on a beach in Kent, and several miles away, Manston runway was on the horizon line, and we saw one of these babies come swooping in, deploy his parachute and come to a landing. It was basically a short-range air interceptor fighter. One of them is still flying in South Africa, and it regularly goes up to the edge of space. Very, very high flying, very fast. Burns fuel like a drain, but in its day, a highly capable air interceptor fighter. I haven't featured every aircraft by any means. We've sort of hit the highlights, but I couldn't finish this film without referring to their biggest exhibit, which of course is the fabulous Avro Vulcan. Originally part of the V-bomber force for dropping nuclear weapons on the enemy, the Vulcan's only combat duty, or the only one we know about, was deployment into the South Atlantic in 1982 from Britain via the Ascension Island and flying long-distance bombing raids to Port Stanley and the Falkland Islands. So this is the Avro Vulcan, a bloody great aircraft with a huge bomb load. Nice to see one still here, but of course they're not flying today. Avro Vulcan.
This has been a Warspite production. If you've enjoyed this, please leave a thumbs up. If you've really enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next time. This is Warspite out, and have a very good day.